Hello and welcome to Chakra News. The conflict in West Asia is widening in its scope. A US-owned vessel was hit while it was berthed in an Egyptian port. At the same time, the Houthis are now threatening any vessels that are passing through the Bab-el-Mandeb. Next door to India, in POK, the region is effectively under martial law. Even as elections unfold, Pakistani security forces have killed over 30 people and injured hundreds. And there's a communication blackout as well. And India bids farewell to an honored hero, Brigadier Basant Kumar, a veteran of the 1971 war and an expert on counter-terrorism and jungle warfare, passed away on 27 July 2026. Now to unpack all these stories and more, we've got with us the editor Chakra News, Sandeep Unnithan. Sandeep, thank you for joining us.
Good to be back, Deepak.
Let's begin with the worrying signs that are emerging out of West Asia.
Yeah.
What's happening over there?
Well, as you said, Deepak, the conflict is widening. And on Sunday, you saw Iran being attacked in the Caspian Sea by Ukraine. This is the first time that Ukraine has attacked Iranian vessels in the Caspian. They say that the Caspian is being used by Iran to resupply Russia, and therefore they attacked this Iranian ship, killing one sailor. The Iranians have said they reserve the right to respond, and that will come. But of course, what we're looking at this scenario is of the two conflicts, the Russia-Ukraine conflict theater merging with the West Asian conflict theater, which is Iran versus the United States. It's a very dangerous situation indeed, because if these two conflicts merge, then you're looking at essentially the crink on one side, which is China, Russia, Iran and North Korea on one side. Now, North Korea is also supplying missiles and manpower to the Russian Federation. China is believed to be doing the same. Now, Iran, and ranged against them is the United States. The unity is a bit in question. They don't have NATO on their side. But this is where we're headed to. And what actually happened there on Wednesday is interesting, because while the Houthis have started attacking Saudi Aramco oil facilities, they've hit Yanbu, which is on the Red Sea. It's a very important Saudi oil export hub. Now, what we're looking at is, over the last 5 months, Iran has demonstrated its ability to directly control the two choke points of the Arabian Peninsula. The Arabian Peninsula is the largest peninsula in the world. It's over 3 million square kilometers. It's roughly the size of India. It has three choke points. It has the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz. You have the Bab-el-Mandeb on the Red Sea, connecting the Red Sea to the Arabian Sea. And then to the northwest, in fact, you have the Suez Canal, which is over 100 kilometers long, 170 kilometers long, and it's about 20 meters wide. The Suez Canal connects the Mediterranean to the Red Sea. It is the shortest route for ships to move from Asia to Europe. Now, Saudi Arabia, conscious of the fact that Iran has been blockading the Strait of Hormuz, has started diverting a lot of its oil supplies via Yanbu into the Red Sea and out of it. Now, when the Houthis were activated to the south at the Bab-el-Mandeb, they started blocking Saudi flagged vessels, attacking their oil facilities. Saudi Arabia started to look at a possible egress through the Suez Canal. And that is why on Wednesday, a very interesting attack, a drone, unidentified drone from an unknown actor, hit this US flagged gas vessel at an Egyptian port, just about 70 kilometers away from the Suez Canal. And no country has claimed responsibility for this, but it has Iranian fingerprints all over it, right? There is only one country in the last 5 months that has displayed the capability, the capacity to strike at such a vast distance, right from the Mediterranean Sea to the Indian Ocean and the Arabian Sea even. Iran has been able to use its ballistic missiles, its cruise missiles, and of course, its drones to inflict damage across the region. It's targeted about a dozen countries so far. So that's what makes this strike very interesting. The fact that you now have two of your choke points directly under your control. You've added a third to that. There are only 7 choke points in the world. Right. 3 of them are in and around the Arabian Peninsula. Iran directly controls one. It has the ability to influence a second, and now the ability to influence a third. which means that effectively Iran has got the whole Arabian Peninsula in a bag. There is nothing that you can do to break this unless the US bombing campaign is able to achieve results, which they're clearly not able to do anything. The Iranian strikes continue. And this is a strategy that I call the Persian engulf strategy, where Iran has literally engulfed the region in a barrage of missile and drone strikes, with the other countries lacking the ability to do anything to Iran.
Sandeep, the last time the Suez was blocked was when the tanker, the Evergreen,
Yes.
was stuck in the canal.
Yeah, in 2021.
And everyone can recall the shock that it sent through the global economy. Not just the petroleum exports,
Yes.
but trade everywhere
Yeah,
was
the trade was
impacted.
blocked for a week, caused billions in damage. There were delays. Ships had to be rerouted, and that showed a lot of people how critical that strait was. Because the Suez Canal was my mistake, not strait. The Suez Canal was built for a different class of ships more than a century ago. Ships have become bigger.
Right.
The Evergreen, the cargo ship that got stuck there with the containers, it's a 400 meter long ship. I mean, that's bigger than a US aircraft carrier. Now, that was buffeted because it was on a full load of containers, buffeted by the wind, and it went and got wedged diagonally in the Suez Canal, and that blocked the whole Suez. Now, I'm sure a lot of military people, especially the IRGC, which does the targeting of missiles, and would have been looking at it very carefully, because they now have the ability to target ships using anti-ship ballistic missiles. What happened because of a force of nature could well be executed using ballistic missiles and swarm drones, which is why, interestingly, when the US deployed their first aircraft carrier to the region, the Gerald Ford, in March of this year, they chose the Suez Canal. And you could see real-time satellite imagery of the Ford stuck in that very narrow thing of, doing that slow passage. Ships are supposed to do a mandated speed of 5 or 6 knots. They're deliberately asked to slow down, because if ships go really fast, it leads to the banks being eroded. And the Suez Canal Authority is very clear. You have to move slowly. And imagine the sight of this 300-meter long American aircraft carrier, 1 lakh tons, moving at such a slow speed, which could be very easily targeted by cruise missiles, by drones, by ballistic missiles. So, which is why when the next aircraft carrier was deployed to the region, and I think it was in April, they chose the Cape of Good Hope. This is the shortest region of the shortest route is through. If you're deploying from the east coast of the United States, the shortest route would be through the Mediterranean and through the Suez Canal and into the Red Sea, if you want to deploy to the West Asia theater. But they chose the longer route because they knew their ships were extremely vulnerable there. And this is a very unique conflict in the sense that you have US carriers deployed, but they're being deployed at far distant ranges from the enemy shores, right? This is to protect them, protect these carriers from Iranian missiles, Iranian drones, and all of that. They have the ability to surge a number of drones, and they don't want to deplete their interceptor missiles, shooting them down. So therefore, ships have to be parked further away, and when ships are parked further away, it means that the aircraft which they have to generate will have to be refueled in the air, because they can't go up and come down after a bombing run. Sortie rates deplete. All of those happen, and this is all happened because the Iranians have now used this drone missile strategy to literally rewrite the rules of warfare as we know them.
So, see, one thing is clear, that the Iranians are in no mood of backing down, even after 13 days of American bombing.
Yeah. So the Americans have been bombing them. They've been hitting them really hard. The Iranians have been trying. They've been standing up to the bombing, and they retain escalation control, escalation dominance rather. So what Iran has been able to do through this conflict, which is astounding, is that they've been able to escalate horizontally, vertically, and horizontally. And I'll explain very quickly what that means. Vertical escalation is when you escalate within a region, a particular region, say the Persian Gulf, which is just across Iran, and you escalate, you hit military targets, then you go over to civilian targets. There is an escalation ladder there, right? When you escalate horizontally, it means that you are expanding the area of conflict. As I mentioned earlier, you have a range of targets across the entire GCC, West Asia, belt, all the way from the Mediterranean right up to the Arabian Sea and beyond. So this is what Iran has done. It's not been done I probably don't think it's ever been done in the recent past, where a country has escalated vertically and horizontally. And that's why they've been able to stand up to the American bombing. I was at this book discussion recently where General Sharma, whose book came out, where he's talking about war is a chameleon. He mentioned the fact that the nature of warfare is changing and the notion of victory is changing because of very interesting kind of set of war fighting that we are seeing, where non-contact kinetic is the order of the day. But I think I would argue by saying that the nature of warfare isn't changing that much. It's changing only because countries are reluctant to deploy boots on ground, right? And I think one of the last wars that you saw a decisive victory was in 2003, right, when the US invaded Iraq. And for that, they had to deploy a lot of manpower, a lot of soldiers. I think it was upwards of 150, 160,000 soldiers, right? And today, the US doesn't even have 6,000 soldiers in the region. And because they think that they can achieve all of these objectives through bombing from the air, by long-range bombing, aircraft carrier power projection and all that, they've made a fundamental mistake. Because till the time you don't go in there physically with soldiers invading a particular country and then planting the flag of victory, defeating your adversary in combat, you're not going to see victory. And that's what's happened in Iran's case as well. Because you thought that you would wage a war from the air and win, that clearly hasn't happened.
Speaking of escalation to India's north, particularly in the troubled region of Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, we've never really seen that scale of atrocity by the Pakistani authorities.
Absolutely. It's what, 30 people died there?
Over 30, at least 30 have been confirmed by independent journalists. The Pakistani authorities, of course, pegged it at somewhere around 17 or 18. But every time a report comes out, you see the numbers growing.
Yes, and it's actually making the Pakistanis look really bad on the global stage, which is not such a bad thing, given the kind of stuff that they've been up to, harboring terrorists, launching them across the borders. There was that very unique protest in London where people were tossing footwear.
Right.
Kashmiris from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir were tossing footwear at the Pakistan High Commission. It's actually sparked a lot of global outrage and, this brutal repression of people over there that tells you that Islamabad is scared. Not Islamabad, actually, it's Rawalpindi that's worried, because they are the ones who directly control Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And I was trying to look at a time when so many of Pakistan's provinces were up in arms simultaneously. I can't think of a previous occasion where you had just Balochistan is up in arms, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is up in arms, now POK. You have the odd attack in Punjab, and maybe there's some restive thing in Sindh as well. Literally all of the Pakistani provinces seem to have a problem, and that's really not to the Pakistan Army's advantage to have so much of internal crisis when you're trying to project your services as a peacemaker to negotiate the Iran war, which they're still trying to do desperately. That's gone out of their hands clearly. The ceasefire is all but in name. 13 days of bombing, the conflict now spreading through Saudi Arabia getting involved, Saudi Arabia creating a coalition of countries in that region of the Red Sea, because now their exports are being directly threatened. They were not threatened away in the last 5 months, but now they're also being threatened. So it's a very complicated sequence of events that's unfolding in West Asia, and Pakistan is caught up in the spiral. It's got external problems, it's got internal problems, it's got its economic problems are not going to go away as well. And this is a very unique state of play for Pakistan, and it remains to be seen whether they get that money that they've asked for, $10 billion from the Americans to keep the home fires burning. And these, by fires, I mean the kitchen fires and not the other fires of insurgency that they've been going through. But it's a very, very tough problem for Pakistan indeed. External, internal problems. And POJK is one launch pad for them in a lot of ways. It is so fundamental to their Jammu and Kashmir strategy, where they used to use POJK as launch pads into India, launch terrorists from there. Literally every significant terror attack in Jammu and Kashmir has been launched from POJK. We've spoken about that in the past, but it remains to be seen whether they can actually control this province, given the fact that it is a popular civilian movement. It started with electricity and food and very basic needs and necessity, and finally has gone over to representation. The fact is that if you claim to run a democracy, the people of that province aren't represented and they're fighting for representation. Now, the big question to my mind is, what will it take for this movement to metasize into an armed insurrection of the kind that you've seen in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa? And before you ask me that question, I'd say that it would have to be a very large atrocity or a series of atrocities on the people, where the crackdown, as we've seen, 30 people being, massacred, civilian protesters gunned down, which is exactly the kind of atrocities Pakistani propaganda machineries accuse India of doing in Jammu and Kashmir. So it's a tough act for Rawalpindi, and just remains to be seen how long before the center starts giving way.
Sandeep, to be sure, these elections are going to be held in 3 phases.
Yes.
And the place where the protests have been the most, shall we say, vigorous is Poonch.
Yeah.
And elections in Poonch are yet to take place. Do you see more troubles ahead?
Well, I don't see an end to this agitation. It's spread like wildfire through POJK, literally, and it's got a lot of support from the overseas Kashmiri diaspora, the POJK diaspora, as we were talking just yesterday, the Meerpuris, extremely influential, wealthy, politically active, politically sensitive community in the UK. If the Pakistan army starts losing Meerpuri support, they lose a lot of overseas soft power that they could count on until now. And, the tide seems to be turning, because, at the end of the day, it's about power to the people, the kind of representation that you can give them, and can you afford to hold on physically to all of these provinces which are up in arms. And fact is that they know that the state is weak, it's weakening, the military is engaged on a number of fronts, and it's a recipe for disaster.
I recall Field Marshal Asim Munir's speech where he talked about a hard state. Is this what a hard state looks like? And what is going on in his mind right now?
Yeah, well, that's anyone's guess. I mean, if I were an Indian national security, decision maker, I would create a digital twin of Asim Munir using AI, and I would start mapping out his responses. And Munir is pretty transparent in what he thinks and feels, and he makes his feelings known. And that speech which you mentioned, the hard state speech, is something that we should have taken note of in 2025 when it happened. I think it was around, was this before Op Sindoor?
Yeah.
It just around
January.
in Jan, just before Op Sindoor, before they launched that murderous terrorist attack in Pahalgam, which led to Operation Sindoor. Now, Munir is a man who's in the middle of many, many, many things. He has to deliver to the United States. He has to deliver to Saudi Arabia, which is now under threat. They might, ask for, assistance. Like, look, we're being hammered. Our oil supplies are being hammered by your Iranian friends, who your neighbors with. Come and help us. So it's a big problem for him. Now, internally, he's also got problems. And it's not a happy place for a dictator to be in.
But it appears that Field Marshal Munir has one ally. We're not seeing the same kind of, harsh rhetoric from Western media. Reuters seems certainly circumspect about the protests.
They're infiltrated with Pakistani. So this is something that the Pakistanis do pretty well, which is, the narrative warfare. They planned pretty well for that. They've embedded their people across think tanks. They have a very powerful overseas diaspora, which they can count on for assistance, which is far more, weaponized than our diaspora. Our diaspora are very good people who go abroad to make a decent living. Whereas in Pakistan's case, a lot of them are actually deep state assets who park there for a purpose. They're running agendas for the deep state. and they're very well represented there overseas. It's inversely proportional to their size and economic clout, their diplomatic clout, for instance. So the Pakistan army, actually, it must be understood for what it really is. It is a business. It's not a military. It is a business. Its main business is the Fauji Foundation, which is Pakistan's largest business conglomerate, as you know. You've done that story on the documentary, the Crore Commanders, right?
Yeah.
that was an eye opener for many of us. The fact is that the Pakistan military is a business. It's a corporation. Its role as a military, as an army, is the collateral that it borrows against. And this is what I read this recently somewhere. These are not my lines, but I thought that was interesting. It was an editorial in one of the Pakistani accounts, which said that they're a business, they borrow, the collateral is their military role, and they're borrowing against that. And they're taking money from the Americans, they're taking money from the Saudis. They're a rentier state, and they need to keep charging rent. And that's how they run their economy. There is no big business plan or anything. Their only plan is to keep themselves going, keep the military in power, and the military can remain in power only when there is a existential crisis to the state,
which justifies their huge budgets and their overarching powers.
So they keep saying that, oh, look, the Pakistan army is there for the people of Pakistan, and if you're not there, Pakistan will collapse. India is there. India is always trying to break us up, do this, do that, and all that. Therefore, it's a vicious cycle there inside Pakistan. And I pity the people of Pakistan who've been in the clutches of this very strange military business alliance that's been ruling Pakistan for almost 80 years. It's about, a dozen families, and it's the army.
Well, moving on to the third story of the week. India lost an honored hero, Brigadier Basant Kumar Ponwar. Now, you had met him personally a number of times.
Yes.
Tell us about this gentleman.
Well, so Brigadier B.K. Punwar, may his soul rest in peace, Om Shanti. Old friend, I've known him for 20 years, exceptional military veteran. And I used to keep joking with him about, he was going on at the age of 80. He was still active, mentally and physically, at a time when people his age were either playing golf or were, drinking their beer or just sitting around doing nothing. Now, Brigadier Ponwar is 1st Maratha Light Infantry, storied veteran, commissioned in 69, goes on just within 2 years of his commission, he goes into East Pakistan. He's training the Mukti Bahini, and then, of course, he surges in, and he's part of the force that enters Dhaka, and he's teamed up with the Mukti Bahini, Tiger Siddiqui, and all of those, people. And he had this very great, impressive voice. He headed the School of Jungle Warfare for the Indian Army in the early 2000s. And when he retired, he was asked to set up this College of Jungle Warfare, counter-insurgency and jungle warfare in a place called Kanker in Chhattisgarh. Now, this is at the peak of the Maoist insurrection, if you can call it that, where you had this red corridor from Pashupati to Tirupati across India. You had this compact ready, it was called a compact revolutionary zone, CRZ. All of them Maoist infected. The Prime Minister of that time, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, had even called it the greatest internal security threat to India. That's how serious the threat was, because you were looking at an armed insurrection against the Indian state in a way that you had not seen before. You had seen, the Khalistanis, a small extent, terrorism in Kashmir, Nagas, of course, but this was like a full-scale insurrection.
I remember, I think roughly 1/3 of all districts in India,
yeah,
over 200 districts at one point were Naxal affected.
All Naxal affected. And I went to Kanker in 2006 because a friend from the Maratha Light Infantry was part of General JJ's team. Colonel Vivek Chadda told me, you must go and meet him. I flew down to Kanker. I drove down with him. And I still remember this, larger-than-life veteran, and great voice, commanding voice, very impressive presence. And in the morning, of course, he said, come and see my parade. Would you like to see my parade? And so I said, of course. So we walked down to the parade ground, and I'll never forget this for as long as I'm alive, that he disappeared. He said, I'll be back. And then all the men are standing there, and this is a college to train policemen to become commandos. So his motto was to train the guerrilla. To fight a guerrilla, you need to become a guerrilla, right? So he would get all these podgy policemen, paramilitary force guys, and he'd give them whip them into shape in about 3 months and make them, fighting fit. And he had all these charts to show you how he was literally training them into becoming soldiers. So back to my story. So I looked around, he had vanished. And then I suddenly see this roar. Yeah! And he's riding a horse, full pelt. And he's inspecting his men on horseback at 6:30 in the morning. And he's, riding up and down. And I said, I've never seen a 60 plus veteran ride a horse with the finesse that Brigadier Ponwar was, riding. And he'd inspect it, and he was tent pegging, well into his late 60s. And tent pegging is one of the most, it's literally suicidal, because for those of you who don't know what tent pegging is, it's where a horse rider comes in at high speed with a lance, and he, spears a peg and lifts it up. He's called Pony, by the way, Pony, because of his name, Ponwar. Pony, and he was a legend, so his friends, one of his friends, I can't remember who, said, Pony is an action hero who's starring in his own action movie 24/7. He's always in character. But the bigger story is that he was actually running the school over there at a time when police and paramilitary forces were, trying to get their act together with the Maoist thing. And the only way to do it was to train and to fight like that, because the army had very wisely stayed away from the Maoist threat. They said, look, we can't help you. This is a heartland insurgency. It has to be fought by the police and paramilitary. We will do rimland insurgencies because it's on the border, periphery. That's where we're deployed. We can handle that. But to come in, to pull Indian army things into the center of the country, not wise. So we will give you people, we will give you assistance. So Brigadier Ponwar is somebody who'd gone there. Someone who trained the Mukti Bahini, who trained Indian army guys.
He trained apparently as much as 37,000 commandos.
Oh yes, he did. And the interesting thing is that he said, look, there is the only way you can beat the Maoists is to fight them physically, fight the guerrilla like a guerrilla. And he said, I'm going to run this camp. And he has the distinction, incidentally, of being quoted by Arundhati Roy in one of her writings. She describes Brigadier Ponwar, who's there doing his course over there, and she called him the Rumpelstiltskin of the war against the Maoists. So Rumpelstiltskin, for those of you who don't know, is that wizard or a gnome from one of the fables, fairy stories, who spins gold out of straw.
It's a German folktale.
Yeah, a German folktale. That's right.
Yeah.
So he's the Rumpelstiltskin of the war against it. That's how I remembered him. And it's very interesting that he began doing this while he was 20 years back, when they were declared the single biggest threat to internal security. He passed away in 2026, 2 decades later, when the Mao's been completely eliminated. So it's literally like, it was mission accomplished for him. Of course, he had retired by then. He was helming the College of Jungle Warfare well into his 60s, I think. He retired when he was in his 70s. At one point, he was the oldest person in uniform. And he'd wear the police ranks. He was equivalent to an IG, if I remember correctly. IG of police in the Chhattisgarh police. And he would, train a remarkable person. And, I really look at him, and I miss him a lot, because I think that, it's people like this who set up institution builders, who go into like a Kanker before Brigadier Ponwar was a forest. It was wilderness, forest, snakes, scorpions, tigers. He set up this massive camp. He built it there. He literally built that place with his own hands. It's now it's a big site. Now I'm sure it must be opened up, given the fact that the Maoists are no longer around. But it's a testament to his his abilities, his thing of a trainer of commandos, a trainer of soldiers. I'm sure he'll be missed wherever he is, and I'm sure he's looking down on all of us from wherever he is.
Well, the Brigadier may have passed away, but his legacy lives on.
Yes, absolutely.
With that, we've come to the end of our discussion. Sandeep, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me,
audience. We'll be back again next week. Until then, stay tuned to Chakra News.